I have a friend I've known about 10 years. I only see him once a year when he returns to this area. I met him at a talk I was giving, but then he moved shortly afterwards, and we've managed to stay in touch through email and the occasional phone call. But once every summer, he returns to see his family and friends, and we meet and share a meal. When I first met him, he was a Methodist, dabbling in Quakerism. Then he became enchanted with Buddhism, so poked around in that for a few years before taking a dip in the waters of Unitarian Universalism. When I saw him this past summer, during that little break we had from COVID, he was exploring Hinduism. After all, he told me, 1.2 billion Hindus can't be wrong. But that was 8 months ago, and since then he has sent in a sample of his DNA and discovered he was 10% Native American, so is now smoking peyote and communing with the Great Spirit. His interest in spirituality expresses itself in a fascination with the most recent thing he's learned. Sometime in the next year, he'll read an article about the latest trend in religion and pronounce himself a devotee of that faith. Like many people, he has assumed spiritual depth comes from leaping from one religion to another, so has never stayed in any one faith long enough to reap its benefits. He's like a man I know who married 6 different women before the age of 40 in search of true love. For God's sakes, I once told him, that isn't long enough to learn their favorite brand of toothpaste. True love takes at least 20 years. I love that scene in the movie Moonstruck. You remember that movie with Cher and Nicolas Cage? I love that scene when Olympia Dukakis, the mother, asks her daughter Loretta, played by Cher, if she loves Ronnie Camerari. And Loretta says, "Ma, I love him awful." And the mother says, "Oh God, that's too bad." I knew exactly what her mother meant. True love takes at least 20 years. Spirituality, I think, is like true love. It isn't found by leaping from one fad to another. It is more often deeply rooted in a spiritual tradition someone has engaged for many years, often for a lifetime. This past January 23rd, the Vietnamese Buddhist monk, Thich Nhat Hanh, as Mary said, passed away at the age of 95, having practiced Buddhism his entire life. He was exiled from Vietnam in 1966 because he protested against that war, and then moved to southern France, where he began the Plum Village Monastery. He was known as the father of mindfulness, and he wrote and traveled the world part of the year, and then spent the remainder of the year in meditation and contemplation. Rather than sampling a menu of religious traditions, he immersed himself deeply in one, reminding us that spirituality is not a smorgasbord in which we sample whatever catches our eye. It is a profound commitment to the riches of a single love. While spirituality is often in conversation with other religious expressions, it remains rooted in its single love. The Dalai Lama didn't become profound and compassionate by his stints as a Baptist or Scientologist. He became the Dalai Lama by wringing all he could from Tibetan Buddhism. Similarly, Mother Teresa didn't learn compassion by attending a lecture on reincarnation as a teenager. Her compassion was rooted in an almost 50-year journey with the Missionaries of Charity in Calcutta. Spirituality is a consequence, a product of our profound commitment to the riches of a single love. This is why it is possible to find deeply spiritual people in almost every religious tradition. Let's have none of that talk that one is truer than the other. All religions have people in them who are deeply and profoundly spiritual people. They are the ones who have mined deeply the very best a religion has to offer. And that always takes time. That always takes time. Back when I was pastoring up in the city, this was in the early 90s, a woman interested in Quakerism began attending our meeting. And within a month, she was arguing with everyone in the meeting about peace. Rather ironic now that I think about it. We weren't doing enough. We weren't marching enough, weren't boycotting enough, weren't writing the president enough, weren't teaching our children enough. And then the Bosnian War broke out in the former Yugoslavia, and she announced that she was no longer a pacifist, that America needed to bomb the Serbs. I felt this kind of existential whiplash. In the space of a month, she had gone from Mahatma Gandhi to General MacArthur. Because she hadn't invested the necessary time to plumb the depths of our peace testimony. Spirituality is about depth, not set of beliefs we have reflected upon, embraced, and persisted with long enough to shape us. It isn't predicated on our fickle devotion to the latest religious fad. And this works for all dimensions of our lives. Joanne and I are coming up on our 39th anniversary. We've been with one another nearly 2/3 of our lives. Notice how youthful she looks. And just this past week, after all that time together, I discovered she really doesn't like fried chicken, but has allowed me to drag her all over the Midwest to various fried chicken establishments, indulging my culinary passion without a word of complaint. You can imagine my shock. But other than questioning my wife's judgment, my point is this: her judgment not about men, but about fried chicken. Let me be clear. My point is this: there is always something to learn when one has made a profound commitment to a single love. We never know all there is to know about someone we've spent a long time with, and we never know all there is to know about a religious tradition, even when we have spent a long time in that tradition. There are new mysteries every day, new insights, perspectives that have evaded us. We must live with someone or something long enough to reap the wheat of their witness and not just the chaff. This pattern of persisting with a single love raises an important question for us. Do we persist in our spiritual commitments and relational commitments long enough to be positively shaped by them? Or are we too easily distracted by something or someone more alluring, more exciting, more exotic? There's a saying I'm sure you've all heard, which originated with our Buddhist brothers and sisters. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. So if this were a quicker query, I would ask this, and I leave us with this query. Are my commitments of long enough duration to learn all I am able to learn? Are my commitments of long enough duration to learn all I am able to learn?